So now we're going to apply everything we know about adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing integers to order of operations and to absolute value. In this first example, we need to go through and make sure that we work within our absolute value bars first, treating them like parentheses. Before we start that, however, we always want to do what? If you're thinking change subtraction to addition, you read my mind. So I'm going to go through and change all subtraction to addition, and to make sure this is clear, you could just stop at that step, but I'm going to rewrite that first step. However, like I said, you don't have to rewrite it. Depends on what makes it easier for you to work. Okay, so to help you read this, this is -2 times the absolute value of 3 plus -5 plus the opposite of the absolute value of -5 plus 7. Again, we're going to start within our absolute value bars. So 3 plus -5 is -2. So we end up with -2 times the absolute value of -2 plus the opposite of -5 plus 7 is +2. Now we're going to take the absolute value of -2 and of 2 before we move on. So -2 times the absolute value of -2 is +2 plus the opposite of the absolute value of 2 is 2, and the opposite of 2 is -2. Now we need to make sure we continue using our order of operations. So when choosing between multiplying or adding, we're always going to multiply first. -2 times 2 is -4 plus -2, which gives us -6. So now we're going to move on to the next problem. And I'd like you to try this problem, but before you get started, I'm going to help rewrite it, since a lot of you are not used to seeing a forward slash, which means division, and an asterisk, which means multiplication. And also, let's make sure you're clear that this is a -6, this is subtracting 5, and that's subtracting 8. And there's lots of subtraction in this problem that we're going to need to change into addition. So I'm going to rewrite and do this first step with you. So we're going to rewrite this as 3 divided by -3 times 2 plus -4 times the absolute value of -6 plus -5 plus -8. And instead of minus -5, we're going to change that to plus 5 by adding the opposite. So now that it's a little bit clearer what all these symbols mean, and you can tell what the operation is for everything and what the signs are for all of our numbers, I would like for you to complete this problem and see if you get the same answer that I do. So please pause this recording. So I ended up with an answer that is -89. Please pause and check your steps if you made any mistakes. Now we're going to work some more with integers and order of operations. So again, I'm going to rewrite this first problem to help you make sure you understand what all these symbols mean and what our operations are in the problem. So remember, the first step is always changing subtraction to addition, and then whatever comes after subtraction, we have to change it to its opposite. So this is really -2 times 3 minus -3 times 4 divided by -2. So now here's something you want to keep in mind. Because we're going to have to multiply -3 times 4 as our first step, since that's in parentheses, you can either wait until you multiply and then change it to plus the opposite, or you can go ahead and change it at this step. That's going to be up to you. So if you change it at this step, you just have to keep in mind that when you add the opposite, there's a little opposite symbol sitting beside your parentheses, which means once you figure out what -3 times 4 is, you actually have to write down the opposite sign. So pause and try this problem. In this case, I'm going to leave my steps in case you made any mistakes. So make sure that when you multiplied -3 times 4, that you understood that gave us -12. And the opposite of -12 gives us a +12. So I went ahead and multiplied -2 times 3, and I multiplied -3 times 4 in my first step. Now I have to multiply before I can add using my order of operations, so be careful there. And you end up with -6 plus -6, which is -12. So let's move on to the next problem. And I'd like you to try this problem and then come back and check your answer with mine. In this example, I'm showing you the first step. Hopefully you changed 8 minus 12 to 8 plus negative 12, and it might help you to change the forward slash to a division symbol to be clear of what your signs are. And you should have ended up with negative 1 as your answer. Let's move on to the next. Oh, that's our last problem.